You are listening to Real Men Feel with Andy Grant. Real Men Feel encourages men to allow and express all of their emotions. Despite what you may have been taught, all emotions do serve you. Real Men Feel is committed to engaging in discussions that most men aren't having, but all men can benefit from. All links mentioned in each episode are in the show notes found on the blog at realmenfeel.org. Now, let's get to it. Hello and welcome to this edition of Real Men Feel. This is your host Andy Grant, and part of my favorite shows, part of my favorite thing about this show is the guys I get to meet, and my ideal guest is always a man willing to come on and share his story, and then also share how he's now serving the world. And today that's what we have, and I'm really looking forward to talking to this gentleman today. He reached out to me. He was a listener and fan of the show, and he's recently written a book and thought it would be a good fit, and I agreed. So my guest today is author and speaker Brad Richard. He joins us to discuss codependency and lessons learned while living his autobiography, Man at 50, A Journey of Crisis, Revelation, and Survival. Welcome to the show, Brad.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate it. I'm glad to be here.
Cool. So before we get into your personal story, I'm always interested. So this is your first book, am I correct?
Yes.
So what prompted you to want to write your story?
Well, believe it or not, the title, I received the title of the book before I started writing it. And it was a phrase, man at 50, that I woke up one morning and I had these words in my mind, had no clue where they came from, what they meant, and I had to analyze it and kind of think about it. And then, the dots kind of connected, and I went, wait a minute, that's where I'm at. That's who I am at this moment in my life. And I went, but what does that mean, and why did I get those words? What am I supposed to do with those words? And, the stars aligned just right. And sure enough, that's what I came up with. It's like, I'm supposed to put this down on paper.
So it's not like for years you had this yearning to share your tale.
Absolutely not. I'm not really an avid reader. And as far as writing, that is not something I've ever looked at until a year ago. So, no. But now I'm on my second book, so.
Oh, cool. Right. So the bug has bitten you.
Yeah, I'm kind of hooked, so it's exciting, and it's a way to communicate that I was kind of unaware of. And, other books. Growing up, I was exposed to a whole lot of authors and writers and never really understood their passion about it, but I do now.
Cool.
I do now.
So as you're one day, you're just this phrase comes to you, man at 50. What did you decide it means? Is it I'm finally a man at 50, or what it means to be a man at 50? Like what does it mean?
Well, for me, and the book itself is, you're exactly right. It's, for my story, it was becoming a man at 50 years old. Finally, most people probably do it sooner, but it did take me 50 years of crisis, revelation, and survival of a lot of different events in my life that brought me to the place where I made that transition and decided to move forward as an adult instead of a child.
So during those first 50 years, certainly as a child, we won't go there, but in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, did you struggle with, am I a man or not? Or was it you're just living your life and didn't really think of it?
Well, we kind of have to touch base on the childhood aspect of it. I'm the youngest of 10 children, and fairly dysfunctional family. There was physical abuse, verbal abuse, sexual abuse that did occur in my family. With myself, I had no physical or sexual abuse from either one of my parents, but I had a lot of verbal abuse and very emotional abuse from my father. And he basically was a very non-affectionate man. He was born in 1922. So back then, any type of affection, love, hugs, kisses, anything like that. That was absolutely taboo. And he formulated that as his. I mean, that's who he was, and none of his sons was going to get any kind of physical attention from him because that would break everything he believed in.
Mm.
So as far as his abuse goes, his emotional abuse, I spent most of my younger years being asked when I came to him for attention or affection. I was asked, "Are you gay? Are you a faggot? Are you queer? Men don't do that," et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And after many years of hearing that, you begin to develop that question in your mind, and you're really unsure. And when it comes to real men feel, yeah, the first 50 years of my life, I had a lot of feelings, a lot of them, and they were very, convoluted and confusing.
Mm.
So that's to answer your question. Yep, I questioned which way I was supposed to go, or go right down the middle. I mean, I really had no idea, and I wasn't clear on that, on if I was a man or not.
So, with your 9 siblings, were any of them, were there someone you could talk to, or was there kind of confiding about the abuse amongst your siblings at all, or?
Um, well, once again, back in the day, it wasn't really talked about.
Mm.
There were stories and accusations that were brought up between the siblings of things that happened. Um, and then there was subsequent denial. I don't remember that happening and things of that nature. The sexual abuse that that I encountered were from my siblings, and I don't have any vivid recollection. My memories of that sexual abuse is more of a cloudy dream type image where I can kind of make things out, and I knew what was going on wasn't right, but not vivid, which is good. Because I really don't need that vivid memory, and so I'm grateful for that. But it was brought out, and it was talked about, but very briefly, and it really was never taken it. It was like, okay, you said that you think this happened to you, and one of your brothers or one of your sisters did this to you, but we're going to leave it alone.
Mm.
And so it was never explored or understood. Just it was a wound that that was out there, and they made their case and stated it, and that was as far as it went.
So the sexual abuse was not your parents and any siblings; it was amongst the siblings.
That's correct.
Okay. Hmm. And as the youngest of 10, there must have been quite an age range. What was the age gap in your family?
There is. I'm going to turn that off. Sorry about that. And as far as me being the youngest, let's see, the age gap. Um, I believe I'm trying to think. I honestly, I don't remember. I know that my oldest brother, he is in his 70s now, so there's probably 15 to 18 years from the oldest to the youngest, and
Okay.
everything in between.
Hmm.
So it's a
And
big gap.
did your father's expression of emotion, his outlook on being a man, did that change for him ever as he got older?
Well, both my mother and my father have passed away, and my mother was the least judgmental person that I've ever met. She was supportive, and I had a really good, strong relationship with her. Um, and she passed away after my father passed away. But part of the story in the book is the time that my father passed away and what occurred during that time. He was in intensive care. He had bleeding in his brain, and he had a blockage on one side of his heart. Um, and from a metaphysical standpoint, um, the bleeding in his brain represented a lot of negative thoughts, delusions, and fear and anxiety, and things in his mind that just really didn't work very well in society or with other people. Um, and his heart being blocked, also from a metaphysical standpoint, that represented that he never really loved fully. He held a lot of his heart back, and when he died with a broken heart
Mm,
and a broken mind.
mm,
And he was scared. He was very fearful to pass on. Um, they basically gave him, when the family made a difficult decision to let him go because there's nothing the doctors could do for him because he wouldn't survive either a heart surgery or brain surgery. Um, he lived on ice chips and morphine for 10 days,
mm.
and that's it. He had nothing else besides that. Um, so that was a real scared man.
Yeah.
And he was leaving a lot of baggage and a lot of stuff behind, that was never resolved. And he was really unsure where he was going. And that's the second reason why I wrote this book. Um, I, made a commitment to myself that I'm not going to go out that way. I don't want to take that stuff with me.
Mm,
And for me, the book is a purging and leaving that behind.
mm,
So, did that,
mm.
I know it was a long answer, but was it an answer?
Yeah. Sure. Everything's an
Okay.
answer.
Okay. I got you.
Now, I want to back up a little bit because so this is your autobiography, but you did write it with a pen name. So why did you go that route?
I wrote it with a pen name because even though the people that are in the book, they all have fictitious names, and my as far as my siblings go, the majority of my siblings are just referred to in their position in the family, younger or older, but not by name. But I wanted to be consciously aware of their feelings, their concerns about family laundry, family story. What gives you the right to tell our family story? And I wanted the story to be more about my life and not theirs.
Mhm.
And so I used a pen name to keep it as neutral as possible.
Okay. And then you even the main character of the book, you goes is named Robert in the book.
Correct.
So that was neither your name nor your pen name. So that threw me off a little bit as I was starting to read it.
Right. Yeah, that is confusing. I've had a couple of people tell me that, and it's like, and I once I explained it, they went, "Okay, I got it." So it's Robert's journey, and told through your experiences.
Hmm.
You know.
Yeah. So it's yeah, it was again with it being written in third person, yeah, it was going to more an observer of your experiences as opposed to first person putting yourself there, I guess.
Right. And
And,
I
and that
wrote
was
it
your
in
goal.
a narrative way.
Mhm.
My writing style is, it's different. I mean, and it's um, I wrote the story the way I would communicate it if I was talking to somebody and telling them my story in person. I wrote it, like I said, in a narrative way. It took some of the emotions out of it
Mhm.
for me to do that. Um, my first manuscript was completed in 4 months, and for me, never had written anything before. Um, I basically just kind of let everything come out of my mind and put it on paper, and then tried to kind of make sense of it so it did tell a story. Um,
And how challenging or easy was you putting it to paper? How putting yourself out there like that? How what was your
it
experience?
it was fairly easy to do that because I felt this drive to, like I said, to purge, and to get my memories out there. And it was also real healing for me to do that. It gave me, the more I wrote and the more of my story I got out of my mind, the stronger I became. You know, uh, to have that out there. And then I began to realize as I got towards the end that it could indeed, hopefully, help at least one other person that might had similar circumstances in their life or even different. But there are things in the book that I'm sure people can relate to and go, wow, um, if he got through that and he is still alive and, a normal adult male at 55, 56 tomorrow, um, you know, maybe I can continue on as well.
Mm.
Just that's that was the first that's the first reason I wrote it, is to help at least one other person.
Oh, I was going to ask. Well, first, happy birthday.
Oh,
And
thank you.
so,
Yeah.
so if the goal was to have your story help others, was kind of the purging and release that you experienced, was that an unexpected byproduct, or did you anticipate that as well, that it would be healing for you?
I knew before I started writing that I needed to write it for myself
Mm.
and to differentiate my life from my father's life. And I knew I needed to write it because somebody out there, and I've already been told by a handful of people that the number one reason that you wrote the book is to help at least one other person, and I've already been told by a handful of people that that's been a mission accomplished.
Oh,
That
great.
it's that it's like you've already exceeded that, and so that's good. I got at least one. Well, actually, I got a half a dozen that have
Right.
told me that. Um, so it's on the right track. But I did know that I needed to write it for other people,
Mm.
and I needed to do it for myself.
Mm. And was there anything specific or surprising that you heard from strangers to their reaction to your book?
Um, a lot of the feedback that I've gotten is, why did you stay there so long? Why did you stay in those negative situations? Um, you know, I could have never done that. I could have never did what you did. I couldn't have made the commitments that you made. Um, I mean, as a synopsis, the story of Robert, of me, is a story of a codependent boy, and he stays codependent through two marriages, and one of the marriages questions and brings up his sexual identity right in his face, where he really now, due to what happens in the first marriage, he really questions his sexuality.
Mm.
And the second marriage is a very controlling marriage. It's a marriage that, my second wife was very controlling, very similar to my father, but was also a mother figure. And I sought out uh, both my first and second wife. I sought out mother figures because that's what I was comfortable with, and that's what little Bradley, or little Brad, okay, that's what I needed. And I needed that codependency and that safety net. But I kept, I stayed in that place for 50 years until several things happened that snapped me into reality.
So, as little Brad, as
Hmm.
really living this wounded inner child experience as an adult, were you aware of that? Did you know that you were kind of, not fully grown up, not being all that you could be, or was
Hmm.
it a mystery? No.
I was aware of it, and every time I looked at changing my behavior, it was that fear of losing something,
Mm.
or being something different that I didn't know who that would be. I chose to stay in that comfortable codependent place, and literally just did what either I was told to do or what I was told I was going to do. You know what I'm saying? It was it was one of those things where I was a follower, not a leader.
Mhm.
Um, and there's several things in there.
Yeah.
Um, Probably the transition began in my second marriage, When I when I made a grown-up decision to stay in a 22-year marriage, with the last 10 years of that marriage being a non-physical relationship. And the start or the beginning of my transitioning to becoming a man and becoming responsible was making a commitment to my second son to stay in that bad marriage for 22 years, the last 10 years being the worst because it was a non-physical relationship. Taking the responsibility and promising myself and him that I would not leave or abandon him until he was an adult, and hopefully he could understand my reasonings for why I left him and his mother. So I did that. And to answer some of the people that have asked me the question, why did you stay in that second marriage so long? And it was because it was a commitment I made to myself and to my son. And that's probably back then that was the most manly thing that I ever did.
Hmm.
And the
And
toughest thing I ever did.
yeah, and when you finally did leave that marriage, how did your son react? Did he appreciate the commitment, or was he just as upset as if he'd left at any time? Or
No, there wasn't any appreciation for the commitment, and he actually left with his mother. They disappeared for about 4 years. I never knew where they went to. I never knew if they were alive and well or not. And until about 5 years after I left that marriage, I did find him online, reached out to him, and told him that I could see from his online profile that he was pursuing his dreams, and I was proud of him for doing that. And I said, I love you, and left it at that. And he blocked me within about an hour. So, needless to say, I don't have a real strong relationship with him. Um, and maybe someday that will change. Now, my first son from my first marriage, I have a tremendous relationship with him, a strong father uh, son relationship. He's an adult as well. He's in his 30s, but he is the one that I left, and I left when he was 3, and I haven't seen him since he was 3 years old.
so you still haven't seen him since he was 3?
No, we haven't seen each other, but as far as Skype and phone calls and letters and cards and Christmas presents, we do have a very strong relationship, and so it's things are turning around, but it does take time
Yeah.
for
Okay.
understanding to kind of set in. So
Hmm. And how's the reaction to the book been from your siblings and any other family members?
I've basically told two uh, two family members about the book. The two most supportive, generally supportive people for just other people's lives, and probably two of them that are the least judgmental, and what two that I felt comfortable sharing it with. And the rest of the family is one of those things where I'll leave it out there, and if they happen to run across it, I'm sure they'll contact me, and I'll address that at that time.
Yeah.
But there's just two other uh, siblings that know about the book.
And do you know if they've read it? Did they give you any
Oh
reaction?
yes, oh yes. They've read it, and well, actually, one of them has read it, and gave me great feedback. They loved it. Um, they understood why I wrote it. They understood the importance. But some of the things that they read was very hard for them because they had to kind of go back and relive some of the pain that I lived. And so we had kind of a shared sadness in certain sections of the book. Um, but they were happy that I stated that and that I got that out. Uh, in a sense, I kind of got that out there for them as well.
Hmm. I wanted to ask, since you were the youngest of 10, I know there was a point where all your older siblings had all moved out of the house. It was just you and your parents for a while.
Hmm.
But was your experience growing up in that house similar to your siblings? Did they have some of the same issues and challenges and abuse scenarios?
The No, I was there was a lot of resentment and a lot of anger um, towards me from my siblings because I didn't receive the same type of treatment. I basically came 7 years later from the last child, so there was a 7 year gap of no new kids.
Mm,
So 7 years later, when I showed up, it was like life's going to be different for him because he's the very last one. He's the baby. He won't get the violence, the abuse. Um, my father was very violent in his discipline to my older siblings, from belt whipping to to being physical with them. And of course, I didn't get that. I didn't get the violence or the hateful nature of his discipline. And they did, and of course, they resented him, but they also resented me because I was spared that. They decided to do things a little differently
mm,
with the last one. And they did to a certain degree. But we all had our stuff. I just had a different group of stuff that I dealt with.
yeah, very interesting. You talk about taking personal responsibility. So while you were growing up and the times looking back that you weren't doing that and you were kind of just the wounded little Brad, were you aware that you were kind of shirking responsibility, and were you conscious that you were just a follower, or was it all just kind of those unconscious thoughts? You're just living your life and you thought you were just doing it like anyone's supposed to.
Right. I honestly didn't have a clear picture of what responsibility looked like. I knew that I could work hard, and throughout the book, dozens upon dozens of jobs. I could have 2 and 3 jobs. I could work real hard, and my father set that example that I did emulate, and I learned that I was never scared of work or working hard, um, and making an income, and providing income to the household like he did. But beyond working hard and making money, I really didn't have any concept of being responsible,
Mm,
you know, or making decisions, or taking my rightful place, in a family structure.
mm,
I didn't know what that was.
mm,
I didn't have any examples to look at.
mm. Right, because so the bulk of the book is are chapters about your three marriages.
Hmm.
So it does really seem like yeah, you almost willing to put yourself away and just be identified as the husband, as the person in a relationship.
Hmm.
Does that ring true?
Yes, very true.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on the money.
So, what are some differences? And I'm going to use in the book. It's Robert and Little Robert, or it's just I want to make it clear for people listening. But or Brad or Little Brad or Robert or Little Robert, depending if
Hmm.
you're talking to you or reading the book. Um, what are some of the differences between Robert the man and that wounded version?
Um, like I said, the biggest transitional part for me is when I left the second marriage, and when my second son had reached the age of being an adult, and I had been doing a lot of work on myself throughout those years. Um, Music had always played a really important part in my life. I always wanted to be in the entertainment business. Uh, I wanted to be I was for a while. I was an Elvis Presley impersonator, and I wanted to be like him. He too had a lot of sexual energy. He had a lot of confusion. He was a mommy's boy. Uh, Him and his father Vernon had a lot of head-to-head, confrontation. He didn't get along with him as well as his mother. So there was a lot of parallels there. So kind of growing up, I kind of used that as a benchmark for me. Um, so music, like I said, it's been a driving thing for me throughout the years leading up to me leaving that second marriage. There was several songs that I used for healing. One of the songs that I used was by the Pretenders, titled "I'll Stand by You," and I'm sure you're familiar with the song,
I am.
and but the words were exactly what I needed to tell little Brad.
Hmm.
And for me, the song was my way of speaking to him through the words of that song. And it was a message I, continually told him that I would stand by him and that I wouldn't let anybody hurt him any longer. And I started to make that transition of taking responsibility for him and his actions. And until I went back, I wasn't prepared to move forward with my life as an adult.
Hmm.
So that's one thing. Um, and so that was a very important song. And what you said, what the difference is going through the healing process and making a conscious decision to go back and revisit him, his feelings, his emotions, his fears, being responsible for all of his feelings and fears and thoughts and behavior, as well as my own in present day. I had to be responsible for both sets of feelings and emotions and alleviate him from his responsibility by taking that on myself, because in essence, it was all mine to take. And so that was the start of that transition, is when I made a decision to take responsibility for him, and in turn taking responsibility for myself and saying, this isn't right. I am not the person I was meant to be at 50 years old. And leaving that very controlling marriage after 22 years gave me a window to move in a different direction. And my third marriage is a complete opposite of my first two marriages. So the opportunity for growth is unlimited in my third and final marriage that I'm in now, because I have the right, I have the opportunity, and I've been given uh, the option to move forward as an adult in this marriage, where I wasn't allowed to do that in the previous two. Does that make sense?
Yep. Nope. I
Okay.
got it. And back to this notion of really finally claiming personal responsibility for yourself, for your life, for your happiness.
hmm
When you weren't doing that, were you kind of a blamer, or was it just that you really just let go and just went with the flow, and you just went wherever a wife or a boss or anyone was going to lead you?
Exactly the second one. I didn't really blame. I know that it's real tempting for people to go, well, I'm this way because
Yeah.
of my mother, because of my father. And I mean, I went down that road a few times. Um, One of the points that I wanted to bring up, we were talking before we went on. Um, Currently, in the news, Netflix has a special on the Aaron Hernandez story. And I find it very ironic that when I listen to his story and I look at his background, um, he had he had a tendency to blame. Well, he blamed his mother. I mean, that was something that he blamed his mother for what his father had done. There was obviously abuse, with him and his father, and his brother, and so I looked at his story and I went, and it's a sad story, because he ended up in a really bad place, obviously. But there was a lot of similarities and parallels there. He did point the finger. He did blame others. He did not take personal responsibility for who he was as a man, but he had the same similar scenarios that I lived through, and I'm still alive. So that is something that hopefully people can relate to. If they look at his story and look at my story and go, it is possible to move beyond the baggage or the hurt or the tears or without pointing fingers. And I just kind of look at where would he be if he took 100% responsibility for his actions and 100% responsibility of who he was and not what he was, in his family background, with all the bad stories of what went on with his father and stuff. So that's just an example to kind of match it up with where I'm at and what I'm doing.
Yeah. In my own experience and with all the men I've talked to, it's impossible to heal or to change if you aren't willing to take responsibility first.
Right.
Yeah. But I've mentioned it many times, but I certainly had a fear of responsibility because I thought that was synonymous with blame. Was that at all kind of your mindset?
Yeah, similar. Yes. Similar. I mean, as far as taking the responsibility and then you're accepting the blame, you're accepting the perspective of blaming yourself, you mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, gotcha. That's what I thought you were. I thought that's where you were going with it. Right, and that was definitely part of my lack of interest in doing that. It's because it's like, well, I'm not taking that on. I mean, I didn't do these things. I'm not going to take that on. But there really is a difference there between accepting the blame and accepting the responsibility. I think accepting the blame is you accepting a negative aspect of your life, but accepting responsibility, you're accepting a positive aspect of your life.
Right.
And there's a big difference between those two. One is very dark, one is very light. And yeah, it's important to differentiate the right one.
Yeah.
And the differences.
Because nobody will always have 100% control over all the circumstances of their life. But what we can control is our reaction, like what we do with that.
Right? Yeah, absolutely.
And that can't be that can't unfold without taking personal responsibility.
And it's lacking. It just 2020. We look around at news stories or Hollywood or all the different stories that we are inundated with and that we hear about every day or that we watch on Netflix or Hulu or cable TV or whatever. And it's real prevalent as far as the lack of personal responsibility or the lack of, well, that's not my fault. That's not my fault. And this was done to me, and because this was done to me, I feel entitled for the rest of my life. And that's real prevalent. And I can tell your listeners, that's really a bad place to be in. I can speak from personal experience that I wasted 50 years of my life in that mindset. And wow, I mean, can't change those 50 years, but I can change my next 50. And that's the direction I'm heading in.
Cool. And I know we've talked before. I asked about this too because of just that phrase. So do you really believe you wasted 50 years? Or were there some nuggets, some gifts? Did it need that to get to where you are today, or does it really feel like a lot of wasted time?
I don't necessarily know if it's well, I guess wasting isn't really a good term. I was just looking at my notes. I guess I wish in my heart that I would have figured it out sooner, because it would have given me more time to help more people and become a stronger person and to be a person that contributes to society in a more productive, strong, healthy way. If it would have happened 20 years ago, then I would have more time. And so, I'm kind of halfway here. And it's like, it would have been nice to have an extra 10 or 15 years, or or 20 years, um, because I think I probably would have had more energy and more opportunity to make a bigger difference,
Mm,
for other people as well as myself.
mm,
But I'm glad it happened, and accept that, and take it from here
right.
and keep running.
Cool. Um, is there a habit, a practice, or a book that helped you that you would want to share with others?
I read a lot of self-help books, which is ironic. I read a lot of self-help books when I was younger, in my 20s. I did the Zig Ziglar, and I'm trying to think of Tracy, Brian Tracy, Brian Tracy, Zig Ziglar. Um, I went through Dale Carnegie. I went through public speaking training, and self-development, courses on selling and career builders. Um, None of those things stuck.
Mm.
Um,
Did you feel temporary gains or stronger at the completion of a book or anything, or it just that it didn't last?
I felt stronger. Like I said, it's kind of ironic. I felt stronger knowing the information that they told me, but I failed to act on the information that was given to me. It's like, that's great. That sounds amazing. I can see someone doing great things with this information. And that was exciting to me. It was positive to me, and it motivated me to a certain extent, but I wasn't that person.
Hmm.
And so, they said, take actions, and you can become a stronger person. You can develop yourself. Um, and it all sounded great, but the most important step that they advocated I do, I didn't do that.
Hmm.
I didn't take the actions. So I didn't really benefit from those. From not that it was bad information. I just didn't benefit from what they were saying because I never utilized it. I never took that tool out of the toolbox, I guess.
So then, was there a specific moment or event that got you to say, "I'm sick of wasting all these years, and I'm going to take action"?
That would be the last 6 months, and I hate to keep going back, but it's part of the story, and it's part of the transition that I want people to get. The last 6 months to a year of that 22-year marriage, my life consisted of going to the post office to pick up stuff that had been ordered by my wife at that time, doing grocery shopping and running errands, getting smokes, gas, things of that nature. And when I wasn't doing those things, I was in my bedroom on the computer, surfing the internet, watching movies, um, in chat rooms, and looking for online attention, sexual attention, um, anything to feed my need to be loved and cared for. And I stayed up pretty much 7 days a week at night into the wee hours of the morning, 2, 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, chat rooms, movies, music, played a little bit of guitar. And I lived in that bedroom with my dog in his crate, every day, every night.
Hmm.
And that was it. I mean, that's all I had. My wife at the time was making tremendous amounts of money, so there wasn't a lack financially. We could buy anything we wanted. I mean, anything. Um, so the financial stability, that wasn't even an issue. What was completely missing was a life, a relationship, with anyone, you know. I had no relationship with my second son. He was very connected to his mother, and we spoke every once in a while, maybe a couple times a day. Hey, how's it going? Hey, can you bring that to me? And that was about it.
Hmm.
Um, so that was a very miserable place,
Yeah.
a very destitute. Just I was. It was kind of like being in prison, and then you get to go to chow and meet some of the other inmates, or you get to go out and shoot some hoops, out on the basketball court, and then all you got to go back to your cells. Well, that literally was the same scenario. I could go out, I could run to Walmart, or I could run here to pick this up, and then I came back home to the same thing, and that went on for months and months and months. Well, actually years, but I kept in the back of my mind that was the same time that my second son was becoming older, and he was getting his driver's license, and he was starting to get you know close. Um, when he turned 17, I mean, in my mind, I'm like, oh, I got to survive a year.
Hmm.
I've got to survive 1 year. Or do I bail and leave the situation and break the promise to myself and break the promise to him? Because after leaving one son behind at 3 years old, refusing to repeat that mistake with my second son, that was a really hard, emotional, angry, tearful time. But I had to keep that promise. I had to stay. And so, like you said, what was the buildup? What was the transition? Years of working on myself and then making that commitment to him. And then that all culminated, or that all came together when he became 18, and he was an adult. And I don't know if he was completely ready to accept my decision, but it met the criteria of that promise. And I had met my current wife. I had met her online. We were friends, and we shared a lot of similar goals, interests. And so I had someone that cared about me, and I wanted to spend time with her, and I wanted to spend more time with her because I felt more alive and I felt worthy. Um, and so meeting her and reaching that end of my promise was the combination of why I made the decision to I've got to leave now. It's time to go.
Yeah. So you were really, you used the prison metaphor, but you were really serving a sentence that you imposed on yourself.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
Well, yeah, it was imposed on me. Um, my second wife, like I said, she made all the money, and all the ideas, and everything that we did, the dozens upon dozens of moves, um, traveling around the country in a converted school bus, being full-time RVers. Um, those were all her ideas to live a gypsy lifestyle and explore the country. Um, my second son was homeschooled, so he had no social skills, and his life basically involved doing the same thing as I was doing.
Hmm.
He just did it in a different room. And then she ran her business, and we kind of, we saw each other every once in a while if we went from one room to the other, but that was about it.
Hmm.
That was the extent of the family uh, that was going on at that time.
Hmm. Hmm. So, is there anything else you definitely want to get across from Man at 50?
I think um, probably one of the biggest things, and I've covered this when I've spoke to people, is I think it's important for anyone to move forward with their life. Um, for me personally, I had to go back and I had to identify the things that little Brad loved to do. I had to identify the things that hurt him, the things that made him feel good. I had to identify his hopes and dreams and the things that made him excited. about life. And I had to go back and kind of reassess him as a child. And then I had to take those same things, place them into my life as an adult, and create or manifest those things in my life as an adult. Because until I did that, little Brad would never be happy.
Hmm.
Because that he was always trying to get those things. He was always behaving in a way to satisfy those feelings and those dreams and the things that he wanted in his life. And of course, little Brad wanted to be an entertainer. He wanted to show off, make people laugh, make people smile or cry. Um, at where I'm at now, at my age, to be honest with you, I'll never be in the music industry. Okay. But the direction I'm taking my life now is other people. And so, in essence, I am in the entertainment business because I am reaching out to other people and I want to help, teach, and give everything I have inside of me to them to help them in any way I can so that they can be happier and stronger. And that's why entertainers entertain. That's why actors act, singers sing, because they want to give, they're giving to people.
Hmm.
And so I'm doing what little Brad wanted to do. I'm just doing it differently, but I'm still accomplishing the same goal that he had.
Cool.
And I'm bringing him forward. And so that's kind of the underlying thing that I want people to get. Go back, get a real clear understanding of who you are as a small child, and then bring them to current day and implement them in your lives. And don't let anything, stop you from doing that. You have to take responsibility for your current self and all the responsibility all the way back to when you were a young child, and then bring what you had back there into your life in the current time frame. And I think people will find a lot of happiness in their lives if they can do that. But there's going to be struggles, and I get that. And there's going to be a lot of negative stuff to go through. But until you grab a hold of it, that's, you got to do that first. And like you said earlier, you got to take personal responsibility. That's the key to moving forward.
Cool. So what's your next book about?
Well, the my second book hopefully will come out next year. That's going to be a self-help book. I only have one autobiography, so that one is the title. I haven't decided on it completely, but for right now, it's titled "Your Little Me," and it's from my experiences. The book is about an individual person, man or woman, if they are if they're fully adjusted and they're happy and they're living their dreams and they're actually doing the things they dreamt about their whole life, then this book's not for them. Because it's like, you're gonna go, good for you. But the people that are not in that place, and it's like, I don't like what I do, I don't like the relationship I'm in, and I don't like where I'm at, then this book helps them step by step to go back, understand, take responsibility for everything back there, and then transition all the way up to current day, and to help them implement everything they dreamed of and everything that was in their heart when they were a child, to make it come true and bring it alive as an adult, and formulate that game plan and move forward and not give up on it.
Yeah, no, it sounds very much needed. That's great. And you have a podcast too. Do you want to give that a shout out?
It's the Man at 50 podcast, and it's on. It's hosted at Anchor FM. There's several links out there on Twitter, on my Twitter feed and my LinkedIn feed, and it's on Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Man at 50 podcasts. It's easy to find.
Great. And we'll be sure and have, you can visit realmenfeel.org for the blog posts for this episode. We'll have links to grab the book and connect on Twitter and LinkedIn and get more information about Brad and his book, Man at 50. And you had mentioned you wanted to make an offer to people listening.
Well, yeah, I just, for your listeners out there, I'd like to offer a free copy of my audiobook. My audiobook came out in December, not too long ago, and it is narrated by Steve Stanzel. He's the voice of HBO. He does the HBO commercials, and people will recognize his voice, but he is my narrator. I think it's an excellent audiobook. Even if it wasn't my book, he did a terrific job. So it's an awesome read. And basically, if whoever wants to email me, my email address is manat50thebook@yahoo.com. It's manat50thebook@yahoo.com. It'll be time stamped, so whoever is the first one to email me and mention Real Men Feel that they heard me on the show, I will give them a free copy of the audiobook, and also offer to them 30 minutes one-on-one if they want to reach out to me, talk with me via phone or via Zoom, and share their story. And I will be glad to listen and give any one of you listeners, along with the free audiobook, 30 minutes of my time, because I would love to hear their story and maybe shed some light on where they're at. And I'd love to hear about it. And if I can help them, I'm more than willing to do so.
Great.
So first person to email me, and we'll go from there.
All right, cool. All right, the race is on.
Yeah.
But yeah, don't assume it's been done. So whenever you're listening to it, it's worth an email, right?
Right.
Cool. So Brad, I want to thank you for sharing your story with us today on the show and telling your story in print. And congratulate you on taking responsibility, on deciding enough was enough. And yeah, there's really nothing. Wow, there's nothing sadder than to talk to someone who feels like they've wasted years of their lives. So I'm glad that is over.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've put a stop to that. So that's that's a very important, important place to get. And thinking about, I wish it would have happened sooner. That's eyes in the past instead of eyes in the present or eyes in the future. So I still have quite a few years left, and I believe there's a lot I can do. And I'm in a much stronger place, and I feel that I'm able to do things now that I could never even conceive of when I was in the younger place.
Sure.
So I'm just ready to move forward, and I appreciate you having me on. It was a pleasure.
Yep, it was. So thanks again, Brad. Thanks everyone for listening. Wherever you're listening, wherever discovering that Real Men Feel, give us a rating, a review, a share, a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Visit realmenfeel.org for more information about this show, past shows, future shows, mystery shows, and send us feedback. And as always, be good to yourself. Thank you for listening to Real Men Feel. Contact us at realmenfeel@gmail.com. Learn more about Andy Grant at theandygrant.com. Please subscribe to this podcast and leave a review on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, Spotify, TuneIn, or wherever you are discovering Real Men Feel.